Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Cockpit project. In a previous video you might remember I made a button panel for the kind of knee position or cheek position if you like on the cockpit, which was slanted up and mounted on a 3D printed bracket which you can see on the screen in front of you here. Well, this video is going to deal with its opposite number on the other side of the cockpit, on the right hand knee position side. And for this one we're not going to make a button panel like we had on the last one, where all the buttons were kind of mounted in this area here, with the wiring going back to the Leo Bodnar board. On the other side, what we're actually going to do is put a bit of a glass cockpit in. I'm going to kind of get out of the 60s, 50s, 70s and head into the 80s and onwards. And the way we're going to do that, or at least the way that I first thought I was going to do that, was to mount a Nexus 7 tablet in this kind of position. But first of all, we've got to make a mirror image of this bracket here, and all that was simply taking a mirror image of this model. So if you go modify, no, actually I think it might be an assemble. No, it's not. It's even in create. There we go. So create mirror, and you can select the bodies that you want to mirror, and then select a line to mirror across if you like. And what that did is it created that shape and that shape. Now they're not exactly the same, mainly because I've cut this kind of pocket out in the mount, this area here, this area here, which is just basically drawing a rectangle the same size with a little bit of leeway as the Nexus 7, and then extruding that and cutting into the original shape. Also thickened it up so I had something to cut into as well, made it a bit more rigid. And the Nexus 7 will essentially sit in this pocket here, and then the plate, which we'll cut on the CNC machine in a minute, will go on top with a nice bezeled opening in this area here so we can reach the touchscreen. And the reason I went for that is because with Android I can put Kodi and Chrome and all the other, apps that I might want to use in the cockpit, i.e. non-critical stuff, and do things like play music or videos or browse the internet, look at my email, all that kind of stuff that you sometimes want to do, especially on those long exploration journeys in Elite Dangerous. So let's head over to the 3D printer now and get this object printed out. And if you remember, I had to split it into two parts here with a couple of bolt holes there and a couple of locating lugs and holes on the other side, just so that we could fit this on the 3D printer and it would print without too much of an overhang, without needing vast amounts of support material off the bed. So let's head over there and get that printed out now. Okay, so all we had to do now was essentially assemble the frame, as you can see there, onto the cockpit chassis, and you can also see the Android Nexus tablet over there on the floor. However, I decided not to use that because I couldn't wire it into the on-off switch on the panel, so instead I used a Raspberry Pi and a touchscreen. Got the Raspberry Pi wall wart transformer, wired that into a switch so that we can essentially break the circuit and make the circuit to the Raspberry Pi and the touchscreen, and we're just going to plug this in. Moment of truth. There we go. And that would have been the end of the video. However, I really wanted Android, and there is a way of doing that by using the Asus Tinkerboard, which essentially is a Raspberry Pi by Asus, and can run Android, and also you can get, you know, Google Play Store and stuff. It's not that easy to do that. There's a lot of fiddling about, and the other thing, of course, I needed to do, which you can see me do here, is I needed to replace the 2.5 amp power supply unit that the Raspberry Pi uses with the a 3 amp power supply unit that the Asus Tinkerboard uses. The good thing about the Tinkerboard is that it's an exact match, if you like, for pinouts and the standoffs for mounting it on the back of the Raspberry Pi screen here, as you can see me swapping one over for the other, so it's an exact match, and that means you don't have to make a new case for it. Instantly, that's a 3D printed case that I did for the screen, just to hold it all together, and means that I'm not mounting it, if you like, directly inside the chassis, so it gives a bit of protection at the back there, especially the little circuit board that's now under the Asus Tinkerboard. So all that needed to do then was to switch that back in once I'd soldered and wired it all up, and then do a bit of programming to get Android working. Right, for the third time we've assembled the plate here with the screen behind it, and this time we've now got it's still the Raspberry Pi 7-inch touch screen, but now we've got the Asus Tinkerboard on the back, which can run Android, whereas the Raspberry Pi obviously has to run the Raspbian Debian Linux distribution, which you can use, but the Android interface is kind of far cleaner. Plus there are some applications available where you can turn this touchscreen essentially into a keyboard interface to your PC across the network, and I might have a crack at that later and almost turn this into a if you like, a multi-function display, but touchscreen. So we've got a glass cockpit. Let's just get this joystick out of the way. So if you remember, I was going to put the Nexus 7 tablet in there, and that still fits, but of course wiring in this toggle switch here to put the thing on and off, and also control the volume with the tiny little ribbon that's in there and the connector that it's got, is very problematic and extremely fiddly to do. There probably is a way around it that I haven't found, and this is a pretty good alternative. So let's turn that on. Right, and we just swipe up. Probably have to put a pin on that at some point, but I'm not going to show anybody that. So here we are, we've got basically an Android touchscreen with all the usual stuff, but most importantly at all for me is, actually we'll put the calculator on the front screen there as well if I can. There we go. So calculator for calculating the profit and loss, We've got Chrome for browsing, and of course for those exploration trips we've got Kodi, which is wired up to my server with all my music and videos on it for that matter, and I can watch films if I like, or listen to music whilst I'm flying out in the Elite Dangerous Milky Way. So there we go, just put the joystick back on there, and that completes the panels on the right side of the cockpit. We've only got one more panel actually to do on the cockpit, which is the one at the rear of the left behind the throttle, which I'll cover next video in this series. It's got a couple of items on there, might be interesting to look at, and so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.